And you, of course, were briefed by the Police Commissioner on Sunday night about Kitty Allen's arrest and provided that detail to the Prime Minister. What was that phone call like?
It came as a real shock to me. I know Kitty personally, and I've had real concerns about her well-being. So it came as a shock. My first response when I received that phone call was to make contact with the Prime Minister, and then we went into action to make sure that her well-being was first and foremost.
And how did you do that?
We wanted to make sure that there was someone there at the police station to collect her when she was released and to make sure that there was support put in place for her.
And what was the Prime Minister's sort of reaction during that call?
He was calm, but he was his number one concern was her well-being.
There's still a lot that we just don't know about what happened that night. Have you been briefed on the detail?
I've been given the basic facts, and the Commissioner of Police does that on a no surprises basis. But all of that information is now before the courts, and it's only appropriate for the courts to be looking at all that as the next step forward.
Do you think that there is a case, given Kitty's status as the former Justice Minister now, for what happened to be released publicly?
That's determined by the courts, and so
But she could take that decision herself.
She could do that herself if she wished to do so. I haven't seen her doing that to date, but it's really important that that commentary about what's happened doesn't predetermine or influence what needs to be determined in the court.
In any case, you take over the justice portfolio, and at an important time for the country and for the government. I want to talk to you about some of the challenges that you take on. And it may have been pushed from the headlines this week, but there is genuine public outrage that a man on electronic monitoring was able to procure a firearm and go on a shooting spree at his workplace, killing 2 people, injuring 7 others. I don't even think it's controversial to say that sentencing was not adequate in that case, was it?
Look, the response, first of all, I have to acknowledge the victims. 2 people went to work that day and did not go home to their families, so I think it's only right for me to acknowledge the loss of life.
And they will be wondering, their families will be wondering how this happened,
and
which
that
is what I'm
tragedy.
asking you.
And I guess I would also like to acknowledge the quick response of police, the fact that they were there within a short period of time to make sure that CBD was safe and to resolve that. Where there will be a number of inquiries going ahead over the following weeks and months. One of those is by the Department of Corrections to look at each stage of the management of that offender and to really take a good look to see if there were any red flags that were missed.
I'm talking to you as the Justice Minister about the sentencing in this case and how a man on home detention was able to procure a firearm and go on a shooting spree, because it is the sentence of electronic monitoring that many people are wondering about in this moment, Minister.
So when a person comes before the courts, that is the role of the judge at the time to weigh up all of the facts and make that determination. It is not appropriate for me as the Minister of Justice to be making judgments about what the courts determine. What I will note though is that over the last decade the number of people on home detention has remained relatively the same.
Minister, I want to bring you back to the point that about it's the judge who makes the decision. The judge is following the law that is set down by lawmakers like yourself in this country. The law would seem to be inadequate at the Sentencing Act 2002 when it comes to electronic monitoring. Are you looking at that? You're right. What Parliament does is Parliament makes laws that have a sentence on them.
Are you looking at it, Minister? But then it's for the judge to take into account.
Minister, I'm coming back to the question, which is, are you looking at the Sentencing Act 2002, which allows violent offenders like Matu Reid, who was on home detention, to be eligible for electronic monitoring if their sentence is under 2 years, like in this case?
No, currently we are not looking at that. The changes we have announced in the last week are the changes that we'll be pursuing towards the end of the election.
That's interesting because the Prime Minister said that you were looking at it earlier this week.
What I wanted to follow up on terms of that, I'll answer that question. We're not planning to change the law between now and the election.
But the Prime Minister has said that you're looking at it.
As part of those reviews, we want to have all of those reviews that's coming from police, that's coming from corrections, to understand what happened in this particular instance. And I have said as well that we want to understand if there are parts of the system that do need to be strengthened.
I'm asking you specifically, and there is a disconnect here between what the Prime Minister has said publicly and what you are telling me now, which is that he said that government will be looking very closely at the Sentencing Act 2002 and the eligibility of people for electronic monitoring. But you're telling me that's not the case?
No, what I have said is that we want all of the information from this particular
case. So are you looking
case.
at it?
So the question you asked me was, are you going to pass legislation
no,
between...
I said, are you looking at it?
Sorry, I understood that. So yes, we will want to see all of the information from those reviews.
That's specifically the Sentencing Act 2002, Minister.
Well, I would like to see, as Minister for Justice, what comes out of those reviews as a result. And when we see where there were potentially weaknesses in the system, if we can strengthen those.
I don't feel like I'm any clearer. Are you looking at the Sentencing Act 2002, which allows people who have violent convictions to be eligible for electronic monitoring if their sentence is under 2 years? Is that something specific you'll look at, because that's specific to this case?
I understand what you're asking me, and what I would like to see as Minister of Justice and Police is all of the information that has come from this particular inquiry to understand if that really makes us look at the Sentencing Act in particular. But that is one of the things that we may well look at once we have all of that information.
Okay. Can you explain to Kiwis why this man was on home detention?
That was a factor that the judge weighed up at the time. I hear loud and clear that there is real concern out there, and I would like to see all of that information to understand why home detention was awarded in that particular instance.
So people will probably be wondering too, how many more Matu Reeds are out there, violent criminals like that with convictions on electronic monitoring?
I don't have the numbers of that with me right now. I do know that over the last decade we have not seen a change in the number of people who the court are determining to have electronic monitoring.
That's not the question that I'm asking. But can you see how this case and others like it undermine public confidence in law and order?
Most definitely, and that's why we need to be taking a really good look to see what went wrong in this particular case and where we can strengthen our system.
Youth crime is also a specific focus for both of your portfolios, actually. And we've had a suite of announcements last week, but it occurs to me that the government has been entirely ineffective on this issue in the 18 months since ram raids burst into the public consciousness. I spoke to Chris Hipkins, who was then the Minister of Police, when he held your portfolio last year. And he was talking back then about this really hard-to-reach group of young people who are recidivist ram raiders and offenders that the government was laser-focused on. But we're still talking about this group now, aren't we, Minister?
It's a complex problem. I know that youth crime has got a lot of factors going on in that space. So what we announced about 18 months ago, that program that really focuses on breaking the cycle of reoffending. All the evidence shows that around 80% of young people that go through that program don't go on to reoffend. Comparing that to National's program of boot camps, around 80% do reoffend who go through that program.
Well, let's talk about your policy.
If I can just get back to the point that what we saw after that was introduced, that a small hardcore group of repeat offenders were continuing to do those crimes, particularly ram raiding. And so the reaction that you saw last week was really drilling down to say, for a small group, that program isn't working, we need to do something more, and that's it.
We identified that small group 18 months ago. Back then, the Prime Minister now was talking about boxing gyms being the answer, which in hindsight just seems ridiculous. Why are we still trying to reach this 20%?
The number is a very small number. We're talking at around about 100 who are the repeat.
But we've been talking about the same 100 kids for 18 months now.
So that's exactly why we've introduced a ram raid offence and changed that offence to make it applicable to 12 and 13-year-olds. What I hear from frontline police officers and also from dairy owners when I meet with them is it was those 12 and 13-year-olds that police did not have the ability to do anything with at 2 or 3 in the morning. So with this new ram raid offence, it will mean that those 12 and 13-year-olds will also be able to have police will be able to do something with them in the early hours of the morning.
So why has it taken 18 months? This must be extraordinarily frustrating for frontline police officers like it is for the public.
It's frustrating for me as well, and we've tried many different things to get on top of this problem.
And they haven't worked, though,
well,
have
I
they?
would argue that they have, because 82%...
We're talking about this hard-to-reach group that was identified 18 months ago, Minister.
And if you could let me finish. So that group that we did identify, for 82% of those young people, they've stopped reoffending. They are not reoffending. But after that, we are still seeing a very small group who are, and so that is why we have said there is a line. If someone is, we want to give everyone the opportunity to get back on the right track, to get them back in school or in training or even employment. But there comes a point in time where if they are repeat offenders, that they need to be held accountable.
Well, there will be many people who think that it's taken too long to reach that point in time. But the police have gained back an important tool recently with their ability to pursue fleeing drivers in ram raids. That was a failed experiment, wasn't it, by Police National Headquarters to stop frontline police from pursuing cars?
So that's the Commissioner of Police makes those operational decisions about how they deploy their staff, and that's always a weighing up of a range of factors that has to ensure public safety as well as not causing loss of life.
It didn't work though, did it? It was a failed experiment. And is that part of the reason that ram raids have continued for so long? They have become entrenched, is that the police had no ability to pursue them for 18 months?
There's not going to be one single silver bullet that will fix this problem.
Is that a contributing factor, though? That's the question I'm asking you.
I would say that I'm really pleased to see that in the last month's ram raid data we've seen a decline.
That's not the question I'm asking you, Minister. That's a talking point. I'm asking you if that was a contributing factor to this problem becoming entrenched.
I would argue that a range of factors, that may be one of them, I agree, but there are other factors as well.
Great. Is the Police Commissioner's policing by consent policy also sort of proving problematic for the government? I mean, there is real frustration with police officers I talk to on the front line about this approach by Police National Headquarters, and there seems to be big tension and big division around this whole policing by consent philosophy. Police officers on the front line want to be empowered to go harder, but they feel like they're being held back by Police National Headquarters. You must have come across that sentiment in your time.
I have full confidence in the Commissioner of Police.
That's
he does
not the question I'm asking you.
If you'd like me to finish, I will get to you.
I'm asking you to answer the question.
Yes, so I think they do a great job at making sure they take care of our communities, and I would like to give the example of Operation Cobalt, where we have a permanent
Minister, I'm going to
police
stop
presence.
you because this is not the question that I asked you. I'm asking you about the tension and the frustration of frontline police officers with Police National Headquarters and this policing by consent philosophy. Is that a tension that you're aware of?
No.
You have not heard from any frontline police officers?
I have not heard that from frontline police.
Well, that's surprising to me because it's something that I get told often. And this is no criticism of frontline police. It's quite the opposite. They're as frustrated as the communities that they serve by their inability sometimes to go after ram raiders, for example. Policing by consent requires, community buy-in. But what if the community wants police to go harder?
I meet with police on the front line every single week. I've been right across the country and I engage regularly with our front line, and the feedback I get is that the additional resource that we've put into not only more police officers but also having the tactical response model that gives police more intelligence, better kit and capability to respond to high risk offenders in their community is received well and is working very well.
If the community want police to go harder, that is at odds with the Police Commissioner's sort of philosophy of policing by consent, isn't it?
So I totally get it that people are frustrated with the level of crime. People have had enough. Now, I've had enough. It's not the New Zealand that I know. But what I hear time and time again is how great our police service is. I have never once met with a business owner or a member of the public who has been a victim of crime that has ever complained about the level of service and response from our police people. They do an outstanding job, and I hear that wherever I go.
But there is frustration within the community about crime right now. This is going to be a huge issue for you at the election.
I 100% get that, and I'm focused on making sure our police are resourced, that we break the cycle of reoffending whenever we can, and also we deliver the message that if there is a line and someone crosses that they are held accountable and they suffer the consequences of committing that crime.
How do you think that the public looks upon your record so far?
We need to keep working hard, and we've got work to do, and I'm well aware of that.
That doesn't sound like you think that the public have total confidence in what you've done so far.
I think we need to keep working harder to give New Zealand confidence that we will get on top of this problem.
It's been inadequate.
We've got work to do. I think and I won't say it's inadequate, because we've seen far more invested in New Zealand frontline police service than we've ever seen before.
So that's not translating into public confidence.
We need to keep working to increase that public confidence, and I'm focused on doing that.